January 17th, 2017. This was the day FNAF World died by Scott Cawthon's own hands. No update 3, no mobile ports, no more anything. This game has been untouched for over 7 years. Not only that, it feels like this game was left to rot in the memories of older fans, with nobody really giving it a second thought for the most part. Until recently, that is. More and more fans and theorists have been noticing references going back to this old RPG game, and I'm so happy that this is starting to make rounds in the theorist community. I've been thinking about how important FNAF World is to the current story we've been getting for over a year now, way before I actively started uploading on this channel. And today is the day I finally talk about it in depth. So strap in everyone, I'm about to tell you how I think FNAF World connects to nearly everything from FNAF 3 onward. It's definitely an adventure, so let's get into it. Major disclaimer here before we truly start. This is just a theory. I don't claim this as the truth no matter how much evidence I may or may not have. If you disagree with me, that's perfectly fine. Theorizing is supposed to be fun and cooperative, which is why I'm so grateful to our community Discord server for helping me talk all this out and get to some of the conclusions I make today. If you want to join, link is down in the description along with all my other socials. Keep an open mind throughout this video, and without further ado, let's begin. Now, what exactly is FNAF World? To put it simply, this was an RPG Scott made seemingly for fun shortly after FNAF 4 was released. It was teased for quite a while with a thank you image on scottgames.com, ever so slowly changing the characters into cute chibi versions that would later be referred to as the adventure animatronics. The game initially had very poor reception upon release, so Scott took it down from Steam, offered refunds to anybody who wanted it, and later re-uploaded it to GameJolt for free after making some well-needed changes. Going back to play the game in 2024, it honestly is still a pretty fun game if you like RPG grind games. The adventure animatronics are adorable, the battles can be quite exhilarating, if not a bit of an eyesore, and the secrets in each of the endings are absolutely lore bait, especially the Halloween edition, but we'll get there later. Scott vowed to never touch the game again after it kept getting hate, realizing he made mistakes that would be incredibly difficult to fix, and it seemed to just fade into the background.
But there were just a lot of bad decisions made at the beginning of that project that doomed it from the start. Like, I was making it with mobile in mind, so it was a really slow resolution. I was thinking about it as a game on the phones. I tried to make the whole game on one frame in Click Team Fusion. That just means I wasn't allowing it to be as big as it could have been. I was trying to cram it all together for my own convenience. And also I was in a rush because I was getting a little arrogant, thinking that, hey, anything I make is going to be gold, you know, and I definitely ate some humble pie with that really, really quick. And I learned that is not the case.
But we really shouldn't have given FNAF World such a hard time. People just didn't like it because it wasn't what they were expecting out of a Five Nights at Freddy's game, which is fine. It's definitely an outlier of the franchise. However, I think it was more important than what people give it credit for. The dusk ending in FNAF World features Desk Guy talking about a creation he made and teases Circus Baby with glowing eyes accompanied by her voice line.
The show will begin momentarily. Everyone, please stay in your seats.
But that's not the only thing that connects to the games. A running theme with everything we talk about today is time. Whether it be physical clocks, the concept of time, or the sound of a clock ticking, time is important in FNAF World. Aside from every game up to this point ending at 6 AM, FNAF World is the first game to truly bring in the theme of time. The clock ending, for instance, is reminiscent of the FNAF 4 ending, which brought us back in time to 1983 to see the death of the crying child. We are still your friends. Do you believe that? Versus, we are still your friends. Do you still believe that? In FNAF World, collecting all the clocks will get you this ending of 2 glowing eyes watching and talking to the player. This ending seems to be related to the crying child in some way, seeing as the clocks you find during this ending will lead you to complete some simple mini-games to continue. These are very similar and seem connected to the secret games you can find in FNAF 3. You know, the ones where you have to click on the cupcakes, press tiles in the right order on the wall, those games. These in turn also seem related to the cutscenes in FNAF 4, where we play as a crying child and find scenes and characters related to all these mini-games. For instance, there's a short scene you can activate by talking to a young girl playing with some Freddy and Friends toys. The Chica toy is similar to the Chica we see in the FNAF 3 minigame, Chica's Party, which can be played by clicking on every gray cupcake with a face on the cameras. The point is, time and clocks as a whole are important, which is why in Sister Location, the baby clock is such a weird addition to have. It very well could just be a reference, as everything I talk about today might be, but with all the information and clues added up, I think this just gives us more evidence on Baby's origins belonging to Henry first. If you want to see my deeper explanation on that, go check out this video once you're done here. To make a long story short, there's reason to believe Desk Guy in FNAF World is Henry Emily, who possibly created the original circus baby, something similar to Ella in the Silver Eyes trilogy. Along with the baby clock and FNAF World's clock ending mentioned earlier, we also get plenty of time, clock, and ticking sounds throughout the series. In trailers for Security Breach, Ruin, and Help Wanted 2, we can hear clock ticking in the background of the music and visuals.
When I first found you, you were nothing.
Cassie, I hope you get this message. I'm trapped here at the Pizzaplex, or what's left of it.
Game testing? Perhaps test driving one of our ride attractions.
Aside from just sounding cool in the videos, it also could mean the three are connected more than we think. There's a theory that recent Stillwell games are parallels to the Silver Eyes trilogy, with Security Breach being the first book, Ruin being the second, and Help Wanted 2 being the third. I don't 100% agree with this, and I think this theory might be dead in the water anyway, but I do think the books have been bleeding into the games for quite some time now, and that could just be part of it. A great example of this, in the Twisted Ones, there's an underground cave system beneath the pizzeria with glowing fungi everywhere. They're kind of natural, kind of fake, it's never really shown or told what they're meant to do. But the important part is we see similar fungi in Ruin right before we get to the mouth of the cavern. Now, this doesn't directly relate to FNAF World on its own, because I can't seem to find anything having to do with the mushrooms or fungi or anything in this game. However, the glowing fungi is also found everywhere in the cave, which has waterfalls in the ceiling, creating a large red lake we have to wade through to get to the other side. A red lake to get to the other side. Old Man Consequences shows up in FNAF World if you end up glitching too far down the levels of the map. He says that this is the end, there's nowhere else to go, and that we're trapped there with him. However, this is not actually the final level. There's one more glitch you can go down, and it's directly in the red lake Old Man Consequences is fishing at. If you get to the right spot by the lake and mash the arrow keys left and right, the player will start drowning in the lake. This is the drowning ending to FNAF World, and is where we find the odd image of an angel? Someone with their arms around two others? Nobody really knows what this image is supposed to be and why it's here. It's one of the many mysteries we've yet to solve. Although, I do find it odd the head of the guy in the middle is a weird shape and kinda looks like he has something on his head, like a certain murderous copycat robot we all know. In any case, the player went too deep and there's seemingly no escape. Now personally, I think this parallels Ruin's main ending of Cassie falling down the elevator. This is definitely a stretch, so take it with a grain of salt, but I think it's interesting to mention anyway. Throughout the final bits of the DLC, Cassie has to travel deeper and deeper down into the Plex. Coincidentally, if we count each of these areas as the different levels Cassie travels down, the Mimic is on the 4th level, which is where Old Man Consequences is found in FNAF World. After the Mimic chase, Cassie dashes into the elevator and gets dropped down to the very bottom of the shaft, wherever that ends up being, with seemingly no way out. Another quick thing to note is that Cassie's name is very close to the name Cassidy, the Vengeful Spirit. Cassidy is also often depicted to have dark hair and pigtails, just like Cassie in Ruin. Many people actually theorize Cassie was Cassidy when the promos for Ruin started dropping, so the two seem to be connected in some way. Again, this isn't a direct connection between FNAF World and Ruin aside from the Red Lake, but it's interesting to see just how similar these endings are to each other with some similarities between each character. Circling back to the clocks, there's also a lot of talk and some imagery about time in the story Tiger Rock that doesn't seem to really go anywhere aside from what happens. The story revolves around a kid named Kai who goes to the Pizzaplex with his friends and gets trapped in a VR experience. One of the friends, Todd, has given their little group the nickname the Timeless Trio and often rambles about being present in the moment. Quote from the book, "Time is a construct. It doesn't exist. The only real thing is now." The story takes place very soon after the events of The Storyteller, where Edwin Murray and Mr. Burroughs die within the large tree of the same name. The Storyteller is running a mimic program that's operated by a large white tiger head hidden inside the hollow trunk, a program that Edwin himself created. Now, this is the interesting part. In Tiger Rock, Kai is trapped in the VR booth for hours, but to him it felt like 3 days. He went home, went to school, even went biking with his friends in his head, but none of that actually happened. As he seemingly goes on with his life, Kai is plagued by the Tiger Rock animatronic, feeling like he's out to get him. There's an owl with one green eye and one blue eye watching him through his window, a cat with the same eyes as he's out with friends, and at school there's a large clock on the wall decorated to look like a face with the same eyes. Quote from the book, "The white clock had a face, not just a clock face, but an actual face. The clock had 2 eyes, a round black nose, and a wide toothy smile. It appeared to be made out of metal, and the face was outlined in black. The eyes were designed to look like they were closed. There were mechanical dropped lids under feathery black lashes. And that's when the clock opened its eyes. By now, Kai shouldn't have been thrown off by the sight of 1 green and 1 blue eye. But he was. This clock is very close in description to the baby clock from Sister Location. Even the eyes have significance, as Baby originally had blue eyes that turned green once Elizabeth possessed her. But the clocks don't stop there just yet. We have one more character who also seems to have ties to FNAF World and Fall Fest. Our favorite lunar gremlin, Moon. And Sun too, of course, but we're going to talk about Moon first. Along with having the most ASMR voice in the game, his sound effect seems to be a combination of a broken music box and clockwork. We know that the daycare attendant as a whole is important, and there's likely a chance that their origins were from Fall Fest in the 70s or 80s. As a quick side note, I don't agree that they're directly related to the mimic like other people think. The fact their teeth look similar could just be that they were built around the same time, if our Sun and Moon really are that old. But back to the point. We know Moon specifically is important as he's shown off a lot more than Sun is throughout Help Wanted 2. If we're also counting Jacko Moon, then he makes an appearance in 6 total minigames, while Sun is only shown in 2. And he also plays a role in the Princess Quest ending of the game, taking the Glitch Trap plush to Vanny. But okay, so he has clockwork sound effects. That's not a huge connection to FNAF World on its own. However, the daycare attendant's connection to Fall Fest is major. FNAF World is the first hint to anything circus or carnival related in the series. Pinwheel Circus and Pinwheel Funhouse are some of the last areas you access in FNAF World, and you can immediately tell it's very similar to the theming of Balloon World, the arcade game in Sun and Moon's room that's theorized to have infected Gregory with the Glitch Trap virus. The game features both Sun and Moon quite predominantly, as well as their merged form of Eclipse if you hit the right glitch. I will say there doesn't seem to be much more than that, seeing as it's unlikely this duo was even remotely thought up of until Steel Wolf stepped into the picture. But the inclusion of Jacko Moon is cause to think there's more to discover, with several of the minigames in Help Wanted 2 feeling very Halloween-esque, similar to the Curse of Dreadbear DLC in the first Help Wanted. These were put here intentionally. Jacko Moon shows up in the Cinder Carousel minigame and the secret path in Captain Foxy's log ride. The carousel is very clearly a nod to Fall Fest, while the secret path in the log ride seems to be about Princess Quest and the original missing kids, since the final section is set in the graveyard with a lantern shining nearby as you enter. Clearly, Halloween and Fall Fest are prominent everywhere you look, and it goes even further when you take the end credits into account. In both of the endings for Help Wanted 2, a funky upbeat song is playing, but it's not just any song. It's a remix of Don't Open the Door from FNAF World's Halloween update. Not the Halloween edition, mind you. That's a whole other can of worms we'll open here in a second. Obviously the tone of both songs are vastly different, however, the tune is the same, just faster in Help Wanted 2. Both songs were composed by Leon Riskin, who's been creating music for the FNAF series ever since FNAF World. It could just be a coincidence or a nod to the first FNAF game he worked on, but come on. We know what series we're dealing with. This has to be more than just a coincidence. Now, since I did mention the Halloween update and edition for FNAF World, I guess we can head over there next. This is where things get scarily connected, honestly. The more I looked into these versions of the game, including the joke game, the more I realized just how much we missed over the years. FNAF World Halloween Edition was a joke game Scott released under the name Lol's Hacks, pretending to be a hacker who would be leaking the full FNAF World game. Of course, he was found out shortly after and the game has been dubbed non-canon, which isn't a big deal. However, some of the enemies in this version do end up in the final cut of the canon game, and boy is there a lot to unpack here. For starters, one of the first enemies you encounter is Prototype. He's not hard to defeat, but there's a few interesting things about this specific character. In Halloween Edition, he has a long neck and is missing a hand and a foot, while in FNAF World, he's a full endoskeleton with a Freddy hat and bow tie. He's also part of a glitched enemy in the game when you glitch out into the overworld, walking across the entire map and dealing with much harder enemies. Honestly, I don't know how else to say this. I think Prototype is the single most important enemy in FNAF World, taking the recent games into account. Why? Well, first of all, just look at him. He looks so similar to the glamrock endoskeletons, it's kind of crazy. Obviously the hands are different and his feet have 2 toes instead of 3, even if their general shape is similar. But look at the chests. Look at the spines. Prototype is like a rudimentary, dumbed down version of a glamrock endoskeleton. Not only that, but Glamrock Freddy in Rune has the word prototyped stamped onto the bottom of his foot, and his missing hands and feet, along with the imagery of his non-existent head and neck throughout the game, coincide with Prototype's design in Halloween Edition. Now don't worry, I'm not trying to say the Glamrocks are old or from a different era or anything like that. That's not really the point I'm trying to make. Just that there are way too many coincidences for this to not be on purpose. Whether Steel Wool took inspiration from FNAF World is up for debate, but this is my debate saying they absolutely did. Another reason I believe this has to do with the Help Wanted DLC, The Curse of Dreadbear. One of the minigames is the Corn Maze, which has Grim Foxy hunting you down as you find all the keys to escape. While it's definitely not the same, the environment looks very similar to the new area in FNAF World's Halloween update, where you play a couple minigames such as Foxy.exe, Freddy in Space, and Chica's Magic Rainbow. The entire area just looks like the DLC as a whole, not just because of the Halloween theming. I definitely think Steel Wool was looking back on FNAF World along with the other games in the series when they were starting to make this new era of the Fazbear story, so I don't think it's too outlandish to suggest it's more important than we originally thought. But there's one more character that I took a closer look at recently and, well, let's just take a look. Mad Endo is another enemy you come across very early on in Halloween Edition. I think he was actually the first enemy I fought when I booted up the game, but he looks kind of familiar, doesn't he? What could it be? Oh.
No! God, please, no! No!
Yeah, Mad Endo looks a lot like the Mimic. The generic shapes are very similar, and both have square holes in their chest for some reason. Mad Endo's chest obviously has that little square while Mimic doesn't, but the empty hole on Mimic looks like something used to fit in there a long time ago. The only connection I can find for the hole and the red square is in the epilogues to the Fazbear Fright series about the Stitch Wraith. In the epilogue for 1:35 a.m., it's revealed that the Stitch Wraith was created by Dr. Phineas Taggart, a secluded scientist studying remnant and agony, who took objects that were haunted and used the agony within them to bring a broken endoskeleton to life. He then replaced the head with that of an old doll to give it a personality, and then took Fetch's battery and installed it in his chest to give it a heart. Some of the objects he took agony from were a stack of party plates, a mirror that witnessed a family murder, and an empty jack-in-the-box. Wait, a jack-in-a-box? Quote from the book. Then he took a deep breath and opened the large square box. As he suspected, this box contained yet another box, an empty jack-in-the-box box. Wonderful, this is going to have a lot of juicy agony in it. I could just be going insane, but that sounds like it could lead back to Jackie, the presumed antagonist for the upcoming game Secret of the Mimic. While not much is known about the next installment, we know that it's very likely going back in time to the 70s from the art design of the trailer, which is the time period Fall Fest is often set in, aka 1979. And yes, there is a Jack-in-the-Box enemy in Halloween Edition as well, but I don't think it specifically holds any significance. With FNAF World being a pretty decent hint towards the origins of Fazbear Entertainment and Fall Fest, this is another clue that links the books to the games easily. Going back to Mad Endo for a moment, Fetch's battery in Stitch Wraith's chest is the closest thing we have to an answer for the hole in Mimic's chest, along with the red square on Mad Endo. Fetch is an animatronic dog that can connect to one's phone and help out with daily life. Fetch is implied to be an REG project, a random event generator. REGs are based in quantum science and are theorized to predict future events in human society. It's honestly a bit complicated, but the long and short is that the science shows how humans can influence quantum events through mental intention. However, it's not a very reliable source of information, as the binary numbers that REGs produce don't follow a set pattern and are randomized. What this means for our gaggle of characters, I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I feel like there's something here, but it's unclear what. I think that it could just be a meta commentary about theorizing, and how the outcomes of the books and games go depend on one's own interpretation. But that's really all I got. If anybody has an idea on what this could potentially mean for the Stitch Wraith or Mimic or Mad Endo, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to have a friendly conversation about this topic. Full disclosure, while I'm here, I'm currently adding all this Stitch Wraith, RNG, and Jackie stuff as I'm editing and finding new evidence and clues. I'm just as confused as all of you probably are, and this may not mean anything at all either. But I figure getting all of this information out there for you guys, along with some of my own ramblings, might help you all to get thinking about the deeper connections. Regardless of if REGs genuinely have anything to do with the story we're trying to unravel, Fetch's battery is the closest idea I have to what might have been in Mimic's chest long ago. Funnily enough, Mad Endo looks completely different in the regular FNAF World game than it does in Halloween Edition. His head looks closer to the Mimic's here than it does in his pixelated version, but that hole in his chest is completely gone. However, there is an upgrade in the game that brings the torso back. This Endo upgrade looks like a more accurate representation of Mad Endo's from Halloween Edition. Most people have been going along with the theory that the Mimic originated closer to the beginning of Fazbear Entertainment's history, starting around Fall Fest. And I fully agree with this, especially because of Mimic Ball. Oh, what's Mimic Ball? Only the very first iteration of anything having to do with mimicry in the entire series. Mimic Ball is an attack that can only be used by a few characters in the game. It will mimic the actions of the party and throw it back at the enemies during a battle. It's a very small clue and doesn't seem important at first glance, but just its existence in the game sounds alarm bells in my theorizing brain. Even more interesting is this attack is first learned in the Pinwheel Circus, and when the attack goes off, Virtua Freddy, god that name, Virtua Freddy appears as a green wireframe to make the attack. The only other time we've seen anything like this is in Ruin in the AR world. The collectibles you can find look like a very similar green wireframe, along with Roxy turning green to replace her lost features. While there are other characters in FNAF World and Halloween Edition that could have some connections to current books and games, I don't think they're actually important. For instance, the boss enemy Security is a large robotic owl with one green and one red eye. At first I thought the owl in Tiger Rock was a nod to this enemy, but it's a big stretch to call this a connection. I mean, they're both animatronic owls with a green eye, but that's about it and not really worth talking about otherwise. But there's a lot of smaller bits such as this that could be related, but are likely just coincidences. So what exactly does all of this mean for FNAF? Is there actually a reason to look back to FNAF World over 8 years after its release? Well, possibly. There are so many questions stemming from it that have never been answered and likely never will be. But with all the information we have now, I think it's safe to say the origins of Fazbear Entertainment and the Mimic are related. Remember earlier when I said the crying child is involved? Yeah, let's talk about that now. With a similar text in both FNAF 4's ending and the clock ending, it's possible that going through this ending is a player putting the crying child back together like promised. But I don't know if it's quite as symbolic as it is literal. Fredbear's lines as he gives you clues to the clock locations are as cryptic as they are literal. The truth is that there is no safe place. You don't understand that. You are made for one thing. If you have succeeded in setting the clocks, then your true goal will be revealed once you have the key. Something terrible is coming. We are still your friends. Do you believe that? The pieces are in place for you. All you have to do is find them. Rest. All of this seems to be us laying the crying child's soul to rest, but I'm not sure that's the full story. To get it out of the way, there's a possibility that the crying child's soul or agony infected the Mimic. This is an idea I just came up with while writing this script, and I figure it's the most crackpot theory that might actually have a little bit of merit to it. Unfortunately, I don't think this is true, but I want to throw the idea out there anyway. With the player going through and collecting all of the clocks, which I do believe are parts of the crying child's soul, and being told we were made for one thing and one thing only, I think we could be playing as, or even just teaching the Mimic how to fight and be violent. Collecting the clocks would mean crying child's soul would eventually get transferred to the Mimic endoskeleton somehow. A lot of people relate Mimic's standard pose of one arm bent to be a representation of a child holding a stuffed animal, like in the story of the same name, where Edwin's son used to carry around a white tiger plush in a similar fashion. And we all know Crying Child's favorite plush was Fredbear and is often drawn in official art holding the plush. Fredbear, of course, is our narrator and guide throughout FNAF World. Edwin and his son David... David! Oh god, 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 oh god. I'm literally having to add so much into this video already as I am editing it, trying to get it out for Halloween, and there is new evidence to show that the crying child's name is actually Dave. Guys, you can't make this shit up, I swear! Edwin and his son David aren't characters in the FNAF games, but Edwin is commonly compared to Henry Emily, which would parallel David to Charlie. So why would Crying Child be the mimic? Well, William is notorious for stealing Henry's ideas and creations, so it wouldn't be out of the ordinary if he did end up stealing Mimic at some point and using it to help put his son back together. Hey, editing Loca here. God, how do I even go about this? So as I'm editing, I remember Dave is also the name that William goes by. So if that's the case, then that is all. Again, it's been a while since I've really looked into like all of Silver Eyes and all of that. I don't remember if William in the series has like the 3 kids and everything. I think so, but if that is the case, or if we're at least using that as part of like the game theory and everything.
Ooh, it's a game theory.
Basically, long story short of what I'm trying to say with all of this, Henry stole either the Mimic program or the Mimic itself. I want to say the Mimic itself, that sounds a little bit more plausible, just for everything going on, unless he stole the program and then made the Mimic, which is also possible. I don't know, believe whatever you believe. This is just me blabbering about something that I went into fully as like a joke, and like I don't think this is canon, whatever. But now that I'm looking into it a little bit more, as I'm editing, I'm finding all of this shit. It's ridiculous. Either way, he steals the Mimic. With him, you know, like having it and everything, Crying Child would hang out with it quite often, similar to like the Freddy, like the psychic friend Fredbear. That's what I call him. If you know, you know. And that's where the Mimic would learn the whole having his arm bent in like a pushing holding position, like he is said to in the books, and how he kind of looks like in the game. Not to mention that the Mimic was originally just half of an endoskeleton, and Jackie in Secret of the Mimic seems to be just half of an animatronic. Obviously, we don't know for sure because there's still the Secret of the Mimic game coming out next year. So we'll have to wait and see on that, but this is just with what I have currently. That is where the Mimic potentially came from, and why Crying Child could potentially be a part of the Mimic, whether it be his agony or his soul. Because he got bullied so much by his brother, if he still hung out with the Mimic as often and everything, then his agony, because he was distraught all the time, would go to the Mimic. So that would be part of why the Mimic is like how he is, how it is and everything. But that's the long and short of like the whole Crying Child Mimic thing. Again, I went into it completely as a joke. It's still like, I still don't think it's 100% accurate, but I think there's something there. The amount of times that the name Dave and David has been used, but at the same time, it could just be a whole Fritz or I think it was the Jeremy thing. Yeah, it was a Jeremy thing, I think, because that name has been used so many times for different characters, but they're all important in some different way. That's kind of what I'm thinking this Dave situation is like. Realistically, it could go any way, so I just wanted to throw that out there. It is currently 2:45 in the morning of Halloween, and I'm trying to get this out on Halloween, so if I don't get it out on Halloween, I'm sorry. It has been a roller coaster editing this video, guys, so bear with me. This has been in the works for a really long time, and I'm still finding shit. Anyway, back to like studio me, pre-recorded me. We're gonna go back to the main video. Okay, bye. This is a huge stretch, and like I said, I don't necessarily think it's true. But there's something fishy here, and it's not just Old Man Consequences Lake. Aside from that, I think FNAF World has a bigger part to the recent games. The tapes in Help Wanted tell us that a bunch of old electronics were delivered to the team to scan in to make things go faster, and this is where the glitch trap virus came from. While yes, Circus Baby's green chip and Afton's agony and the circuitry are a big cause of this, we also need to know where the Mimic program came from. In the epilogues of the Tales from Pizzaplex books, the Mimic was delivered to the crew cleaning the FNAF 6 pizza place on accident with no information on where it came from. If this happened in the game universe, his circuits were likely scanned and used to help with the Help Wanted games, as well as the programming for the Pizzaplex before killing a bunch of people and being sealed deep below the place. On the other hand, if the Mimic has been trapped underground for longer than we imagined, then where did the program come from initially? I have a hunch it came from the in-universe arcade game of FNAF World. If this was truly a game that customers were able to play, or even an unreleased game in the universe, then having its code scanned with other animatronic parts and circuits and such is possible. When the techs for the Pizzaplex went through all the files, they found the Mimic 1 program and decided to use it as a guide for their own gain, which is how we got the Mimic 2 programming, which is what was used in the Glam Rocks and other parts of the Pizzaplex. I think regardless, FNAF World circuits were used in the shipment of junk that was scanned in for everything we have now. The corrupted code, along with Mimic's programming and Apton's agony, were the catalyst for creating the glitch trap virus, and therefore led to the events of Help Wanted, Security Breach, Ruin, and even Help Wanted 2. The long and short of all this is to say FNAF World not only hints to the carnival origins of Fazbears, but also Henry's story with the Mimic. The locations in the games were inspired by Fall Fest, and even likely the town itself, with the Pinwheel Circus being the most fleshed out and decorated area to make a point. Mimic Ball is the start of Henry starting to mess around with mimicry AI, testing its limits and seeing the basics of what kind of power it can hold. With this information, he would go on to create the Mimic 1 program and animatronic that would eventually all get shipped to the FNAF 6 location and Silver Parasol games. While the Mimic wreaked havoc on the pizza place, FNAF World and the program got scanned into the Freddy Fazbear virtual experience and created the glitch trap virus, causing another circle of violence, destruction, and vengeance. Stillwell makes deliberate decisions in their environment and designs to coincide with their storytelling. It's no secret the team has been wanting to visit the origins of Fazbear Entertainment for years now, and I have a feeling we're going to be heading back there very soon, especially with the announcement of Secret of the Mimic. FNAF World is part of that, no matter how you look at it. Whether it's simply just a game that in-universe people could play, or if it truly is the beginning of Mimic's story, there is something deeper to be found within this game, and secrets that may never be fully realized. Scott may have abandoned and forgotten about FNAF World, but the fans sure haven't, and I don't think Stillwell has either. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk on this game. This has been about a year and a half in the making, with more research and fact-checking than I've ever done for a video before. If I did somehow miss anything, please let me know in the comments. This theory has a special place in my heart, and I'm really excited that I finally got to share it with all of you. If you liked the video, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
No, you know, the one thing I would change, I wish I could go back and have one more shot at FNAF World. I really, really do. It could have been a good game. Could have been a good game. Who knows? Maybe somewhere down the line, if I get really antsy about it and have a lot of free time on my hands, maybe FNAF 2 or FNAF World 2 might be a thing. I bet it would have really been something. But like I said, who knows? Maybe for the sequel someday.